Welcome to this week's episode of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm so excited because I just had a conversation with Gosia Fitzgerald, who is the co-founder of One Page CRM. And it is a CRM solution. She's also the CFO of One Page CRM. And it is a CRM solution that Gosia and her husband developed specifically for our types of businesses, for businesses of one and other small businesses, because we're the type of business owner who is wearing so many different hats in our own businesses, especially being responsible for lead generation and selling. The process of tracking all of that and making sure that we have an effective lead generation and sales process can be very different from those businesses who have larger corporate environments, for example, or sales teams or marketing teams. And so I spent some time on today's episode interviewing Gosia, and she shared with us her behind the scene tips in seeing so many businesses of one and small businesses and the mistakes that they make when they're running their lead generation and sales processes, the best practices that they can benefit from, and all of that behind the scenes exposure that she has to businesses leveraging her CRM tool, One Page CRM, and shares with us such a fountain of knowledge. It includes things like what mistakes to avoid as you're managing your lead gen process and sales process. She talks about how to choose whether or not to use a CRM versus Google or Excel, and shares with us her experience in building a software company from the ground up as a founder and making decisions about hiring, and ultimately how she and her husband have built a company that stands out amongst 2,000. She shared with me there are over 2,000 CRMs on the market. So how have they built a solution that stands out amongst all of those 2,000 CRMs? So I'm excited for you to meet Gosia, to hear her expertise and experience that she shares with us on this episode. Whether you choose to use a CRM or not, this is really valuable insights and strategies that she shares with us to make our sales time that we have to be lead generation and selling more effective. So if you would like to sign up for One Page CRM and use my affiliate link, I will send you a guide that helps you to configure One Page CRM in a way that matches up to best practices specifically for you as an independent consultant. In a lot of ways enables the strategies and tactics that I share with you in my book. And so it brings it all together in a very quick setup guide for you to be able to hit the ground running with One Page CRM. So if you use my affiliate link to use the Page CRM tool, I will send that to you for free as a thank you. So hopefully that's a win-win for both of us. With that, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm so excited to have you join us, Gosia. Thank you for taking the time. Gosia will introduce herself, but a little bit of background before she does. We met over LinkedIn, I think. You could correct me if my recollection is wrong, Gosia, but if my recollection says that you reached out to me on LinkedIn, just in the cold messages. I don't even know if we were connected yet. And you sent me a message and it just really caught I get a lot of those messages. You probably do too, Gosia. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, but I get so many cold messages on LinkedIn that I don't really ever reply to most of them. But the one you sent me really caught my eye because it was very thoughtful. It was very personalized, and we both work with independent consultants and just made me want to get to know you. And so we booked a call, and Gosia will tell you more about herself directly, but she is the co-founder and CFO of One Page CRM, which is a CRM designed specifically for small businesses and businesses of one to help us run our businesses. So anyway, Gosia and I've had a few calls. I've been using One Page CRM and really love it. I have consulting clients who are using One Page CRM who also love it. And so I thought it would be really beneficial to bring Gosia on the podcast this week and for us to talk about how to leverage a CRM, like one page CRM, to close more business as a consultant, and a lot of other topics, I'm sure, as we go. So, Gosia, thank you for being here today. And I would love it if you could introduce yourself as well. I didn't do a thorough introduction, but would love to hear more about you and your background, and then we'll get going from there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Melissa. It's lovely to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. And you're completely right. For the first time, actually, I reached out to you through LinkedIn, and that was because I came across your article about the CRM, and I just thought that you just nailed it completely. Like what people think about the CRM, what's important in the CRM. And I just said, I just have to talk to Melissa and just, get her thoughts about what works, what doesn't work for you, coach a consultant. So I just definitely wanted to find out a little bit more about it. Yeah, so I'm super excited to be here on your show and talk a little bit, what we do. So as you mentioned, one-page CRM is a CRM tailored for the needs of the small businesses, but business owners primarily. We support business owners, consultants, and entrepreneurs who want to take control of their sales. They want to actively grow their business, but sometimes, there's a lot of things to handle in the business. So priorities change and it's not always easy to focus on that side of the business. In terms of my background, I suppose I always been involved in the small businesses, and that's rooted in my family tradition, where my dad was leading his own business. So I could actually watch him, how he was managing at the time. Obviously, he wasn't really tech savvy, and it was quite a while ago, and he didn't have a system to support him. So actually, I could see both sides of what happens when you actually don't have something that maybe help you get organized and focused. But listen, One Page Time wasn't our first venture. So first we had a small design agency, and my husband and myself were both running it, and we really loved, building new websites, and we were super excited about delivering a great UX for our clients. But what we were struggling with a little bit was winning a new business, right?
Yeah.
That's not always so intuitive. It can be a challenge for many, many people. So Michael, my husband, being an engineer and an inventor, he said, well, I have to do something about it. I just, he's this natural problem solver. And he says, well, I just need something to support me, because without sales, the business can't survive. So we have to really learn fast how to get organized and what was important in the process. And within 3 months, I think, if I remember correctly, we got the concept right. We got it developed and designed very quickly. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the MVP concept of minimum viable product. And you just want to test, really sit on the market and see if actually that even works for people, ask for feedback and help to improve it with the feedback of other people. So that's really how we started. And once it got traction, we decided to pivot our business and concentrate on that.
Yeah. And how long has it been, Gosia? 10 years, I think you told me, or longer?
More sure. It's nearly 14.
14. I lost lost track of time. 14 years that you've built this CRM solution and have been focused on helping other businesses, small businesses, businesses of one. And like you were describing, I think the uniqueness of being this person responsible for sales and running the business, or maybe you have in some cases, maybe a small team, but it is different than trying to use a HubSpot or something bigger for that is really more built for a corporate environment.
Absolutely. Like small business or businesses of one, they don't need super complex solutions. Primarily it serves more as a distraction. You probably might waste more time on trying to set it up. And if you can do it yourself, that's well and good. But for the big systems, that they're a little bit overkill for the need of the consultant, it's totally unnecessary if you need to hire someone to help you start it. So I think there's a variety of different solutions right now on the market where you can actually get the ball rolling straight away. Like there's trials. So I think if somebody's in the journey, starting their journey of maybe like a technology adoption, looking for digital tools that help them, be a little bit more productive, just create a couple of trials and check them out for yourselves. And I think that the nice kind of guidance is here that if you spend more time, maybe days or weeks, trying to figure it out if it's actually working for you, if it's actually bringing any benefit, probably more likely this is not assistant for you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Gosha, before we dive into all the questions I have for you, tell us where you're located in the world.
Yeah, so I'm located in Ireland. Even originally I'm from Poland, but Ireland is my home for the last 20 years. So yeah, it's quite late here for me.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us on your evening. We appreciate it. Okay, so let's start off. I love to just really think about you have the benefit of having visibility into so many pipelines, consultants pipelines, entrepreneur pipelines, other small business pipelines. And I'm really curious if you could share with us what your thoughts are about you probably see some really healthy, thriving pipelines, some that might not be so much. And I'm curious, what do you think? What do you see that makes a business successful at lead generation and business development versus one that might not yet be as successful?
Absolutely. Well, there's quite a few factors at play for business that results in doing well and being successful. But when I think about that, and I watch a couple of different businesses that we work with as well, I think the main difference comes down to taking action versus procrastinating. That aspect is nearly the top for me, because if you really want to have a successful business, you really want to get busy with hustling and
Yeah.
looking actively for opportunities. And it can start with new connections, having new conversations, and opening a lot of doors that not necessarily might convert into opportunity and business for you, but you increase your network. And basically, it's a really lovely way of meeting new people, but also learning from others as well. Are you offering the services that people are looking for? Can you improve them? Can you learn from others what else is on the market? Can you make yourself more competitive towards other offerings? And I think through that process, you can really figure it out what works best and what doesn't work as good for you. And you can kind of apply it as a process going forward. So like you can treat it as a testing ground, but like get yourself very, very busy and get out there and talking to people. That would be my kind of observation. And apart from, doing this, I think another important factor is of resulting out of having so many conversations is to knowing who you're talking to and maybe collecting, like building a profile of the person that you're basically talking to.
Mhm.
So there will be a lot of information that you want to store about maybe their business, what their preferences, their needs. And therefore, you need some sort of a system that you can always rely on, that you can reference. You can quickly maybe, you're having a call and you want to quickly scan, oh, what was the topic of conversation last time? And, what you send them, what was the email conversation and so on. So it's very, very important to have something like that that will help you have that information in hand, basically.
Yeah, I think you point out a couple of things here. Number one is the consistency of lead generation and taking action, like you were just describing, and also that managing the relationship moving forward, having some way to stay top of mind. There's so many times where I've met people that I really appreciated meeting them and knew that perhaps we could partner in the future, or I could leverage them as a someone to refer people to, but then I never hear from them again. And then you kind of lose track of who that person is. It's hard to even find them. So, like you're describing, it could be on the kind of part channel side or partner side or client side. Really keeping track of those things in one place can make life so much easier as we're trying to build a pipeline and also find other consultants to either do business with or refer business to. Having it organized, it seems simple, but it's a challenge.
I totally agree. And you hear it from everywhere. You just have to follow up and don't be satisfied with just two follow-ups. It can actually be up to five follow-ups. That this is really where you're trying to get somewhere and you're getting some response. Because the truth to be told is that we're very busy and we not always might be reacting to the first or second follow-up. But if that person is persistent and send a couple of them maybe down the line when I'm a little bit freer to react, then definitely that might kind of work in your favor. And I just feel like people are discouraged a lot of times, just finish on the two follow-ups and that's it. And then move on to a new prospect. and trying to develop a new relationship, which is more time consuming and might not lead somewhere either. So I think it's very important to kind of look at the process, how you actually kind of conduct your relationship and how you develop it as well. I was actually talking to a colleague of mine, and he shared the story of having to follow up 13 times when he looked at the number of messages that he sent, and that was through LinkedIn or social media or commenting or private messages, emails, and a mixture of maybe sending some blog suggestions. And it came to a number, came to 13 follow-ups. And it's just amazing because what happened was that a client of his now became a client, but it was just super busy, wasn't able to respond to his queries before. But because he was actually always in touch, wasn't too far away, it was a very natural process for that prospect to get back to my colleague and starting conversation. So sometimes a little bit of patience can go a long way, and it's definitely something that people might just persist a little bit more with. But the problem with the follow-ups that sometimes we don't make it a part of the process. So what I mean by that everybody has their sales process, and sometimes it might not be as delivering the best results as we hope for. And this is something to do with consistency that you mentioned. And what happens is that some of the sales activities are inconsistent. They don't have the clear steps. Maybe you don't have the clearly timed interactions, what you want to do. You don't have a clarity of your message. And therefore, you struggle with maybe bringing bigger deals or converting the customers, and you're missing more opportunities. So what I'm saying, it really brings huge results that if you build your process, if you looked from the start to the very end, when you actually hope to close the deal, what are your steps?
Right.
And when you're going to actually conduct them in order to not to overwhelm the client, but be always relevant and always on top of their mind.
Yeah, I think this is so important because sometimes, especially with selling consulting, we think that it's an interview. We kind of, it's easy to think back to when a client or when you were working in corporate and you were interviewed and what that process looked like. And this is different. This is you taking the lead. This is the consultant selling their services and knowing and building out what those steps are so they can lead a client through the process to figure out, to decide if an engagement makes sense or not. And so what you're describing, Gosha, I think is so important, both on the component of knowing what the steps are of your sales process as a consultant, but also what are what's the exception handling, if you will. So for example, like you were just touching on when you send a proposal, for example, and a potential client doesn't respond, knowing how you're going to handle those types of follow-ups is so important as part of the process. And I'm curious, as you were talking about those follow-ups, what are the best practices that you see? Because I think a lot of times people get caught up in, I don't want to bother someone, or if they want to engage me, they would have responded by now. And so we just let it go. And so I'm curious, what do you see as best practices when you're talking about that example, even of those 13 follow-ups that resulted in a client?
Yeah, and I always say, let the clients tell you that they're not interested until you hear a clear no, and sometimes once or twice, you shouldn't stop basically reaching out. And sometimes when you're working on multiple clients of yours and you're trying to convert them, it might be a little bit distracting if you don't have a system in place that kind of help you see what is your next step. Okay, so in one pitch CRM, how we're solving it, we actually have an element of your relationship. We kind of call it the next action. So what is your next step? So there's only one thing that you should be focusing on as a next step. So for example, when you're sending a proposal, you have to still first do a job rather than already sending someone an invoice, right? It's impossible to do that. So there's a sequence of steps that you have to do before. But when you're dealing with multiple different relationships, I think you're progressing step by step, one thing at a time. And only when this is done, we're kind of saying to you that, okay, now you just send a proposal and you know that okay, you be hoping that this client will just come back to you in 2 days. But if they don't, why don't you just create a reminder for yourself saying, okay, well, if they don't come back, I should just reach out to them and just remind them what they think about, are they going to proceed, and so on. So before you move on to the new prospect, just set that action for yourself and then move on to the next person, because this is the moment of clarity. You just completed one action. Mm-hmm. And then if you move straight away without scheduling a next step, what it means that when you come back to that contact of yours, you might kind of, okay, start wasting time thinking, oh, what has been done? What did I do the last time? What did they say to me? And trying to look at all the history and of interactions with this particular person, rather than, okay, just sit down and you have your actions just listed in front of you, and then you just need to focus on execution of it. Okay, so until they say clear no, I would say keep getting in touch. Like, I think people would appreciate when you show the authenticity and genuine interest in the customer's needs as well. So that kind of all helps you build that relationship. And they'd be more prone to get back to you because they might feel like, okay, this person understands me, this person listens to me, and they'd be more willing to maybe start engaging with you as well, rather than engaging with someone that sends very generic messages.
Yeah. Are there any examples, Gosia, that you could share with us off the top of your head? I'm putting you on the spot. So, thinking about when we're following up, wherever it is in the process. So, maybe you just met someone, a potential client, and they said, that they want to hear more about what you do as a consultant, and then they canceled the meeting that you had with them, or you've scheduled a discovery type session where you're wanting to understand what their requirements are and how you could help them as a consultant. And for whatever reason, that needs to get rescheduled and then they don't follow through, or those types of things where it seems like things are moving forward and we're getting positive indication from that potential client, and then something follows through. And so you want to be following up with them in a valuable way, one where you don't feel like you're bothering them, or where it feels like it might not be something that they would want to be hearing from you. So I'm curious, what do you see as you're noticing your clients following up through the CRM in ways that might be more effective than other ways?
Yeah, and I also experienced that myself many times as
Yeah.
well. Like, yeah, you have a promise appointment and something happens and people tend to reschedule, or they're too busy to show up maybe to a meeting. And how do you bounce back from it? And what's the angle that you can take to bring their attention towards you again? And I totally understand that as well. I think I like to always bring some examples of maybe businesses that I've worked with and how I help them as well, so they can see the value that we bring. It's not only talking that, okay, just only selling ourselves and how our product, how our service can help them, but also in expanding it towards other people that we also help, that they might just experience the same issues as your prospect that you're currently trying to convince to work with you. I think if you're one of those people that might enjoy writing some content, and I think LinkedIn is super source for, showing your expertise, showcasing your expertise and what you're good at as well. And I think you can actually even touch base if somebody didn't really, maybe they didn't show up to the meeting because they might not 100% be convinced that maybe even they're not sure they want to work with you. But if you create your network on social media, if you create your network of followers as well, that they're interested in what you have to say, then that increases their trust as well. And people say, oh, I definitely should be in touch with this person. And that's building your profile as well, and hopefully decrease the numbers of cancellations or meetings that never materialize.
Yeah, it's that visibility,
Mhm.
creating that visibility. I always love to just try to be you think of unique ways to add value versus continuously following up. Can we reschedule the meeting? I've thought I was thinking of you, and here's an article or a post that I made on LinkedIn, for example, that is related to the challenge that we've been discussing. And approaching things in different ways to get back on at the top of visibility. A lot of times we make it about ourselves, and most of the time it's usually about them being too busy or priority shifting or whatever the case may be. So the more we, I think, can take it out of our own head and more into what you've been describing, Gosha, of having a process. So we're not having to think about, should we do this or not? Or what is this other person thinking or not? We've set it up in a process so that we know that we're just taking those steps. And a lot of that self doubt and second guessing can be minimized as a result.
I agree with you. And I think the beauty of having a process is when you deliver those steps over and over again and you can see the results. Because it's not straightforward to build that process. Sometimes you have to experiment a few times. What is the next steps? What is my message? Maybe I should just personalize it in a different way. I should just phrase it in a different, put a focus on something else. So you have to experiment until you find out what is this ideal sequence that you should follow. And I think when you nail it, when you finally see that it increases the conversion of your prospects, then it should be easy in a way that, okay, all it's left is remove this hesitation, remove the planning. You focus strictly on the executing of the next step because you believe this is the next best move for you. And it should be because you already practiced that with a couple of your clients and maybe you collected feedback from them as well. And when you have that good relationship, when, they trust you and they can share, okay, maybe help me to improve, what else I can improve my relationship with you and how else best I can help you, you can actually change that process as well. And hopefully that will have a greater impact on the conversion there as well.
Yeah, I think you bring something up that's so important. It's probably from your agency experience as well, which is marketing and creating this type of lead generation is so much about testing and experimenting and not worrying about getting the right answer or the wrong answer. We're just experimenting to figure out what works most of the time. I think as consultants, sometimes it can be challenging we want the right answer, we want the best answer, we want the right way to do something. And sometimes that's challenging to get into more of this marketing mindset that it requires a lot of experimentation and trial and error to get to a place like you're describing that as a consultant what steps work best for you from a sales perspective, from a lead gen perspective, from a follow-up perspective most of the time. So that then, like you said, you can proceduralize that and then operate it without letting your head get in the way, your mindset get in the way. Let's shift gears for a second. Gosha, one of the things I was really curious to ask you about is when you're thinking about consultants, specifically independent consultants, using a CRM versus some use a Kanban board like a Trello or something like that, or even a Google Sheets. I'm curious, what do you see the benefits are for businesses like ours to use a CRM as opposed to something that's, the spreadsheet or DIY type of a system that they set up for themselves?
Yes, a lot of people just love Excel, to be honest, and they just have it set up in a way that it works for them. And that's Excel. I love it myself in a way that it takes a lot of data. You can just put a limited amount of cells and you can primarily build your profile of the customer as well. And that's partially what the CRM does as well. It stores all the numbers of interactions. You can put your notes, you can put the requirements and so on. But the only thing with Excel is really kind of focusing on the past, what has happened, rather than being a forward facing. And you don't want to be falling into the trap or of having just managing the context, just building this 360 profile that obviously is very important and it help you to conduct the business and win more sales. But how are you using the Excel spreadsheet to push you to move forward? There's certain functionalities in the CRM that can really speed up the process of bring you closer to closing the sale. And it doesn't get mixed up. I think sometimes Excel, it's not as bad because if there's a business of one, you don't have anybody else messing up the formulas or, columns and stuff like that. So in that sense, that's okay. But if you want to centralize, for example, your communication, if you want to sync your email communication, it's especially important to isolate those data from other non-business contexts. So it gives you immediate focus. Okay, what has been discussed? You don't have to trying to fish out the important emails from your very busy inbox. Everything is really just associated with that particular contact there as well. So I think from this perspective is that sometimes we kind of against of using a system. I'm fine where I am and I feel like I can keep going, but I think you have to ask yourself, is the system help you maybe actively sell and go out there rather than hiding behind the scenes and maybe just delaying that activity that you have to do if you want to get sales?
Yeah, I think you bring up such an important point because if for those of us who use Excel or a Google Sheet or even a Trello or a Kanban board, a lot of times the data is captured there and we feel comforted that the data, the pipeline that we've got is captured there. But to your point, if it's not driving forward what the next step is, and it's just sitting there as this is a potential client versus really enabling your sales process, like you were describing earlier, Gosha, what is exactly the sales process? What does the lead generation process look like? And helping you to always know, okay, this is the next step and this is the date that the next step should happen, and creating that proactive almost to-do list for you. It's so easy for things to fall through the crack or things to like you were describing earlier, to procrastinate, and that can result in thousands and thousands of dollars or euros or whatever currency you're on of impacts. And so sometimes as a consultant, we think investing in these types of solutions, even if the software cost is not exorbitantly high, like a Salesforce would be, for example, but sometimes we think about investing in solutions is coming out of our own pocket because we're a business of one. Whereas versus thinking about it as, no, this is a business enabler that's going to help me at least close another client or a client more quickly than I would have, and pays for itself in just one simple contract. Thinking about it in that way, I think makes sense for consultants to even put these solutions in place from the outset of their businesses, even if they haven't landed a client, because for that simple reason alone. What else do you see around that, Gosha?
I think the difference between using a specific system for sales as a CRM also plays part when you're trying to utilize the system to work for you. Okay. So you have, for example, you use it for your communication. And I mentioned email communication and email sync as well. But sometimes what you might find that you tend to use the same content in your email. And instead of maybe copying and pasting emails that you might send to a previous clients and personalize it a little bit more, there's functionality like email templates that can be used and can be probably sent to multiple people at one time.
That's such a good way to wrap up this episode because that's why we're consultants. We want to have flexibility and freedom and our own autonomy. And so having tools and systems that can help us to do that more effectively is incredibly invaluable. Gosha, thank you so much for coming here today. We really appreciate it. We'll put the link to the show notes to One Page CRM. As I mentioned, I am an affiliate of One Page CRM, a proud affiliate. And as a gift to those listeners who would love to sign up through my affiliate link, I have a configuration guide so you can set up your system, your one page CRM system in a way that matches up to the way that we as consultants use CRM, the software and the lessons learned that we've already captured from me using one page CRM as well as other consultants using one page CRM. So you can go to the link that we'll share in the show notes and sign up for a trial. And then from there, grab that configuration guide. So you have step by step of how to set up this tool with the exact configurations that I recommend in my book and to clients. So with that, we want to thank Gosha for being here today, and we'll put the link to other resources from her in the show notes, and we'll go forward from there. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.